Hi everyone, my name's Cassandra Kennedy. I'm the First Assistant Secretary of the Biodiversity Conservation Division here in the Australian Government Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment. I'm so excited to be with you all today to introduce the latest in the Landcare webinar series for International Women's Day. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that we're all coming to this meeting from today. For me here in Canberra, that's the Ngunnawal people, and I'd like to extend my respects to their elders past and present and extend those respects to the traditional owners of all the lands that you're coming from today. The Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment is, of course, a huge champion of women in agriculture and regional areas, and I am so excited to be here today to introduce this webinar. For me, I've always worked in the Department of Agriculture and now Environment in its various iterations, and I've been very lucky to be able to see the amazing contribution that many Australian women have made to their industries. Here in Biodiversity Conservation Division, we're lucky enough to look after the National Landcare Program that through its many sub-programs has been able to help some of the people that are here on the webinar today. It's great to see Kirsty Lee, who is also one of our regional agricultural landcare facilitators, here hosting the event. It's also great to see that Sally Downey is here, one of the winners of the ABC's Heywire program, which has been supported under the department's Building Landcare Community and Capacity for some time now. And of course, Fiona Hilstein, who is one of my colleagues here in the department and also an alumni of the Australian Rural Leaderships Program, which has been so formative in so many leaders that we see in Australia now. I think I'll leave it there because we all want to get on to the main business of the webinar. Happy International Women's Day, everyone, and thanks for having me. Over to you, Kirsty.
Wawa, hello, and a warm welcome from Tangaroa Country, specifically Mansfield in the northeast Victoria. I'm privileged to be with you this afternoon for Landcare Australia's 2022 International Women's Day webinar, Landcare Women Break the Bias. My name is Kirsty. I'm the Regional Agricultural Landcare Facilitator working in the Golden Broken Catchment, and have a passion to empower people, especially women, to be the best that they can be in managing and working on and for the health of the land for current and future generations. Landcare was launched over 35 years ago by two women, Joan Kerner and Heather Mitchell. Today, Landcare continues to celebrate and recognise the value and importance of women who work on the land across Australia. This webinar aims to celebrate the thousands of women in Landcare and their contribution to local communities and natural resource management. I'm wanting to thank Cassandra Kennedy, who presented the opening welcome, and Landcare Australia, and the Australian Government Department of Water and the Environment for organising this event today. I was reflecting on the number of roles and tasks that I have undertaken just to make the time to be here today. I can imagine that I'm not alone and that many of you have had additional carer roles, worker roles, partner roles, and on top of that, possibly working through lunch just so that you can be here today. So thank you. Chris Jammy, in his book, Kill-Osophy, said, "It is not hard to understand a person. It's only hard to listen without bias." I know that we are all here to engage in listening without bias. So I am privileged to invite the wonderful lineup of women from across Australia that we are going to be chatting to today. Cassandra mentioned a few of them, and I would like to formally introduce the four women sharing their story with us today. Nat Somerville. Nat has been a land carer all her life, currently living and working on Ngurri country in South Australia's mid-north. Nat is a farmer, grazier, mother, mentor, and a proud Torres Strait Islander woman. When Nat is not farming, she's mentoring Aboriginal students in local schools and assisting educators to deliver respectful First Nations histories, perspectives, and cultural content. Natalie also volunteers on community and industry boards. Welcome.
Thanks very much.
The second wonderful woman is Fiona Hilstein. Fiona is the Director of Horticulture Policy for the Australian Government Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment. Originally from Wangaratta in Victoria, Fiona is now based in Canberra, where she has spent her career advising on agricultural policy, drought and rural assistance, and natural resource management. In this capacity, she feels she can have the greatest impact. Fiona is also a participant in the Australian Rural Leadership Program through the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation. Welcome, Fiona.
Thanks, Kirsty. Lovely to be here today.
The third lady we have is Sally Downey. Sally grew up on a dairy farm near Forbes in central New South Wales. Sally is a strong advocate for better health services in rural communities and for tailored mental health programs. She was chosen as an ABC Heywire Trailblazer in 2019 for helping her local community with the mental health pressures of drought. She was a representative at the UNICEF Youth in Drought Summit and spoke at the National Drought Forum. Sally is currently studying a Bachelor of Agricultural Science, working part-time as a drought policy officer and farming with her partner at Trundle. Welcome, Sally.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Tess Greaves. Tess is the Regional Landcare Coordinator at North Central Catchment Management Authority in Bendigo, Victoria. She holds a degree in nature tourism from La Trobe University, and her career goal is to increase community awareness of environmental issues. She coordinates the Chicks in the Sticks rural women's events, which I hope to hear about more later, and showcasing women working in landscape restoration and sustainable production. Tess won the Steadfast Young Landcare Leadership Award at the 2021 Victorian Landcare Awards and is the nominee in this category for the 2022 National Landcare Awards. Welcome, Tess.
Thanks, Kirst, and happy International Women's Day, everyone.
A very warm welcome to our guests, and that includes you joining us online. We would love you to be a part of our conversation today, so we welcome questions. If you are joining us from the Landcarer platform, please place your questions in the comments box underneath the webinar screen, and we will try and weave them into our discussion. You will need to exit the full screen mode if you would like to see the comments box. If there is time remaining, we'll explore some of those questions that we may have missed. We hope that you sit back with a cuppa, hopefully, and enjoy the wonderful conversations about Landcare Women Break the Bias. So welcome everybody, and it's lovely to be here. My first question to the panel today is about Landcare, because we're hosted by Landcare Australia. Landcare is about caring for the land, and in doing so, very much about caring for people. How do you see your role in caring for the land and its people? So, Nat, if it's okay, we'll start with you. Tell us about your focus in this space.
Sure, and I must say I am on my lunch break today, so happy International Women's Day, everyone. We seem to be so busy around this time of year, but this is a really important topic, especially for us here in Australia, but all around the world as well. So when we put it in terms of the perspective of First Nations people, Landcare has been around, or the concept of Landcare has been around for many thousands of years. This is not something that just started 30 odd years ago. This is something that we've been practicing for a very long time, and including sustainable agriculture as well, in that same category of Landcare. So, I'm a farmer. I grew up in the agricultural industry, more around beef cattle. My family, or all my traditional country is in the Western Torres Strait Islands, in Mubiarg, and that's on my father's side. And that island itself is about a 650 hectare island, but it's surrounded by this amazing wealth of food and resources that is still there today. Our people have been farming there for over, I think there was a study done 2,000 years ago. There was records shown of farming and in the banana industry, and we've had to prove that point in more recent times to be able to prove that we have access to land or ownership of land. So when we talk about land care, I think of the big picture, I suppose, and include all those aspects within it. So I am on Nudgera country, and I've been farming here for over 17 years. And I'm very, very mindful of whose traditional country this is, and really try my best to incorporate their values and their input and engage them in everything we do here in this region. Nudgera people haven't been living in this country or on this particular land for a while due to colonisation or forced removal out of this land. So right now it's really important we try and, create that avenue and be the conduit to get them back out on country and involved. And it's happening, and it's fantastic to see. So back to your question about, caring for the land and its people. Although I have a real passion for agriculture and the environment, when I decided to go to university, there was no such, course of combining the two. There wasn't a sustainable ag degree back in those days, so I had to create it myself. And so I ended up taking another year at uni to, finish that off. And I think it just goes to show just how, how First Nations people, a lot of First Nations people, are not only just environmentally aware, but also, sustainable agriculturalists as well. But there's this other, side of the triangle. It's culture as well. It's all holistic. It's, when we talk about caring for country, it's not just land, it's not just water, it's everything within it, above and below the surface. And so to me, that question is huge, and I could be here all day talking about it. But in terms of the land, we are at a point in Australia where we need to get our skates on and fast. It's critical that we are doing everything we can to improve our landscape due to dehydration. And then obviously on the East Coast, we're seeing a lot of, these weather events happening over there as well. So we need to be mindful of that as well. But how do we do it in a way that is a balance for not only the land, but also the people as well, and everything within it. Our wildlife are the ones that suffer too. Our agricultural industries are suffering when we are not on the front foot of managing these disasters. Back to the theme though of the International Women's Day of Break the Bias. I suppose in terms of people, we need to remember that, assumptions are not going to progress conversations or relationships. We need to be able to clarify and check in with people about who they are and what they want. So I know when I started out in the ag sector, there were hardly any female agronomists around. And I did, find myself being called the secretary or this black fella out in the paddock, what are you doing here on my land kind of thing. And you know, that kind of thing still happens today. As a farmer, you know, it's always, even though I'm trained and skilled in this area, it's always, you know, oh, you know, can I talk to your husband, or you must be the farmer's wife, or, you know, and I know some people think of that term in a way of, you know, endearing, but for me, it actually sets me back in my career. So it's really important that we check in on ourselves and about what we're saying and pulling ourselves up when we find ourselves in being biased or stereotyping.
Yeah, and we will explore that a little bit later with you, Nat, because there's so much to talk about in that space. I'm really interested in your comments around values and a conduit, and I wondered whether you might talk to us about how you interact as a conduit to bring surface people's values and to work with people in that space. Are you able to touch on that?
Yeah, I can. And this is really important. And I think we're more and more aware of this now, is that we can't force people to change their opinions. We need them to be able to change their minds in order to create, you know, really positive change and impact in all that we do. And it's across everything. So in order to yeah, sorry. What was
no,
the
that's
question?
Okay. I was really interested in how you work as the conduit to bring, you know, the sense of that value for that person to the forefront, and, you know, work with people in that space.
And a lot of it is about sharing stories and commonality, isn't it? It's about finding what each other, you know, share as important, and then working on that. And we find this a lot in environment and land care. We find this a lot in cultural aspects, and agriculture, or health and environment. You know, it's all multi-pronged, and the communication is the key, and good, effective communication, and using shared values as your basis of communication. A general conversation, you know, that's all it takes, is checking in. How are you? You know, starting a yarn and just continuing it on without any kind of, you know, without any feeling of receiving anything back. It's a gift. You're giving somebody a gift and not expecting something in return.
Thanks, Nat. That was very insightful, and that's what we're here today to hear your stories. And so I'm going to pass over to Tess now. And I know Tess personally because we're in Victoria and both work in Landcare. So I do know that, Tess, you're involved in a group called Intrepid Landcare, and that seems like a lot of fun. Tell us about how Intrepid is caring for the land and its people. I'm sure some people will be curious about that.
Yeah, Intrepid Landcare is very fun, and it's meant to be fun, and it's really deliberate in the way, kind of what Nat said. It's very clear about its communication and its messaging and how it brands itself in a very sort of niche way. And so Intrepid Landcare it was started a few years back and kind of came in with a bang at the National Landcare Conference a couple of years ago now, and has sort of spread its way, particularly down the East Coast. And we, in the couple of groups we have in Victoria and the groups that I'm involved in, we're just a group of kind of younger people. I guess it's marketed sort of to 18 to 35-year-olds. And it's about, you know, the tagline is doing stuff that matters. And I love that, because that's how I want to say things. But you often find yourself in meetings that are super formal, or just people aren't speaking the same lingo as you, and you're like, oh, don't say things like that out loud. But yeah, Intrepid's all about it. Like, just talk from the heart and say how you feel, and let's get in there and do stuff. So there's a few dreams that are really different. Like our members are really keen on sustainability and plastic waste, and I guess a few topics that aren't traditional land care. The members are young. We do not own land and have access to sort of owning land in our near future. So we're we're a group of of people that would, if we're going to do traditional land care stuff, we'd jump on board with the local land care group and kind of see what they're doing. And it's predominantly experience based. So do a paddle down the river and map some willows, or do a day of weed pulling, but have a band and a pub meal at the end of it, that type of thing. So it's really social, really active, really outdoorsy, and sort of adventurous, I guess. So the trend in volunteerism is really showing that people are interested in experience-based volunteerism, and that's I guess the gap that Intrepid Landcare is filling. It's sort of by young people for young people. I personally do not believe it takes anything away from what land carers have been doing. North Central is the birthplace of land care, so we're very passionate about my traditional land carers and making sure they're supported. But Intrepid has a place as well. It's a really fun space, and it's something different, and it's new, and it's targeted. And things have been pretty impacted by COVID. Our group only started in 2019, so we didn't really get any runs on the board before COVID came. So we're slowly setting out our agenda for the year ahead, and hopefully got some good things on the calendar.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a really empowering model, Tess. That's what I'm taking from it, and that social aspect is about that caring for people, in addition to the caring for land. So it'd be really great to see see what comes out of that, and how other models, more traditional models of land care are challenged through that. So that sounds fantastic. I'm going to move to Fiona. Fiona looks like she's having some trouble with the internet, so if we catch her while she's here, that would be great. Fiona, you may have a different perspective on caring for land in an urban environment. Can you tell us about how you might incorporate land and people into your lifestyle?
Thanks. Happy to, Kirsty, and apologies, I am having internet connectivity issues today, so please bear with me. As you mentioned in your opening, I grew up in northeast Victoria on the farm, and my parents still farm, and I loved being outdoors, I loved nature, and I pursued tertiary studies in that area. And now I find myself on Ngunnawal country in Canberra, where I work for the Commonwealth Department of Agriculture, and I see my contribution in sort of three ways. One, in terms of policies and programs that I have oversight for, and making sure that we incorporate the people that look after the land on which we all live. I see it as a contribution I can make to my community, and also in terms of raising the next generation of hopefully land carers. So I do look after horticulture policy, but I've worked in lots of different roles, and it's always sort of thinking about how we can make sure that we incorporate sustainable agriculture in the policies and programs that we work on. I am fortunate to live in an area where we're very close to nature parks in Canberra. So my local community association has done a lot over the years in advocating for the maintenance of those lands, but also protecting other areas in the nearby community from developers. So I was, editing the community newsletter for a period of time. So I would look for opportunities to talk about the sorts of things people can do in their own backyards to birdscape to their own environments, and also to share with them some of the wonderful plants and animals in our nature park, so that next time they go for a walk, they might look for those things and they may appreciate it a bit more. And I guess thirdly, it's, I've got 2 children, and I want them to love the environment and protect it and care for it as I do. So it's just taking those opportunities to go for walks, to disconnect, to look at the plants and the animals, to listen for the birds, and hopefully raise children that care for the environment like we all do.
Yeah, Fiona, it sounds like you've got your fingers in multiple pies there, and that the impact that you believe you can make as a person is like so many women out there, so multifaceted, if we take a time to just sit back and go, actually, we do have our families, we do have connection to natural landscapes, and, we can influence people in our work and life. So it sounds like you've really tried to embed that in your life.
Yeah, I certainly have. And I think I want my children to appreciate the land and I want them to look after it. But also I get so much enjoyment from disconnecting with things and going for a short walk and looking for the gang cockatoos and the echidnas and just slowing down and appreciating what we've actually got on our doorstep and just how important it really is to look after.
Yeah, and that's one of those ways that we can, all do those things, can't we?
Yeah.
Sally, last but not least, by any stretch of the imagination, being a farmer, it's probably a little more obvious how you're trying to care for the land. I'm particularly interested in any specifics that you and your partner may be doing to try and incorporate those practices, sustainable land practices, into what you do on your farm. And, if you touch on the mental health advocacy role that you've been doing, that would be fantastic as well. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, sure. So as a farmer and having grown up on a farm as a kid, like there's always this knowledge that if you don't look after the land, you won't reap a good harvest, basically, and that it's our responsibility to take care of that land. And the older I get, the more I see that that's not the perception many people have of farmers. And it's definitely something that I believe we need to change as an industry. And I've seen that in my studies of taking more responsibility for our land and what we can do and starting to embrace those practices and technologies that can preserve the land and even improve it. So for us here, a big focus for us in the drought was actually maintaining that really important ground cover. We knew that was so essential for our recovery and for also just looking after the environment that we live in and the environment we rely on for livelihood. So even it meant for us like destocking quite a lot. We got rid of 100% of our cattle and we're only down to, say, 300 sheep out of like 1,500 would be our average. So we were destocked by the end quite significantly. But we knew we were doing the right thing by our land in making that decision, no matter how difficult it was. And we can look around now and we saw how quickly our land recovered when the rain did fall. And that is just really good to see, and that we as farmers can take steps to care for our land and preserve it. And I guess that does play into also taking steps of caring for our own mental health and preserving that of our communities. And the drought was a really big thing for me. Like when I started in my drought work, I was 18 years old and on the farm, and we went into a drought. And I just knew something had to be done. And I'd had my own experience with mental health. And no matter how much I wanted to hide it and not talk about it and kind of not share any of that, I knew going into this drought that people were really going to suffer, they were going to struggle, and that those resources and services they need wouldn't necessarily be there. And if people like myself who have a lived experience don't stand up and speak about what we need and their experience, then nothing will change. So that's why I took on that type of role. And I kind of see it as we care so much for our farm and what happens on it, whether it be the animals or the crops or the soil, but we don't always do the same for our mental health. And it's not a huge focus in agriculture or our communities. And that's what I really believe needs to change. So, yeah, that's kind of my perspective on that and kind of interweaving the two, I guess.
Yeah, to me, that story sounds like you've taken on the responsibility not just of your land, but that similar to what Nat was saying, that the mental health of the person and the land are so interconnected that they can't be dissected. They need to grow together and be strong together. And it seems like that's how you've taken your role in on your property.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely plays into that connection I think we all have with the land and the environment in some way. And that I guess it's really obvious, like in a drought, for example, how just looking at that dry landscape that seems so barren and kind of hopeless has such an impact on our mental health. So there is a big connection to that. And making sure that we're looking after both, I think, is really important as farmers, but also as regional and rural communities as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because those regional communities and rural communities all support each other. It's the farmers, it's the butchers, it's the bakers, it's everybody who supports each other in that space. So yeah, we might explore that a little bit further on, Sally. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm going to move on to our next question, and please feel free to drop a question in if you're listening online. We'd love to hear from you, and know that you're out there and wanting to hear from these people as well. So today's theme for International Women's Day is Break the Bias. Nat touched on this earlier. I'm actually quite curious about the barriers that you may have faced in your work and how you've broached them and worked constructively to overcome them. I suppose that's my sort of bent. So Tess, I'm going to start with you first this time. I know that you've created a women's only event called Chicks in the Sticks, and I know you've borrowed it, so we'll hear a bit about that. But it would have had its challenges years ago. And why did you do it? And how did you overcome those challenges for anybody out there who are wanting to break those biases?
Absolutely. Let's break them down. So yeah, I guess a little bit about what Nat said, about land and caring for land's been going on for, millennia and generations. Well, women's gathering is nothing new. Like, we're not breaking any molds there. We love a good yarn and hanging out together, so that's no drama. But it was really obvious in the data that was coming back from our CMA events and the extension we were providing. No matter really what topic we were covering, land care, soils, waterways, weeds, whatever it was, women were not in any way participating in the numbers that we knew they could. And the event data was really showing that running an event at Wednesday at midday is probably not ideal for most working and farming rural women. My colleague at the time, Ashley Rogers, we saw that our neighbouring CMA, Wimmera, had previously hosted this thing called Chicks in the Sticks. And so we were like, let's take that. So we grabbed that idea and ran with it. But yeah, it wasn't easy. We didn't just stroll through the CEO's office. We had a lot of briefs and a lot of convincing, and essentially all male management at the time. And we sort of went in and said, this is a expensive event. We want to run it. We want up to 100 people attending, and we want to make it really flashy. And can you please give us the money? So it was a bit of an ask at the time. We also obviously made it exclusive, so we were like, you can't come. The first year there was a lot of pressure, and I remember that really clearly. 5 of the female staff got around Ash and I and supported us to run that event, and it was so good. It was it was great. I think if that had flopped, we wouldn't be celebrating our 10th anniversary this year with the event. But yeah, we had to break down some biases really about, well, why do women's only event need to exist? What's the point? Should we be exclusive? Yes, but yes is the answer. We do need women's events, and we do need to have conversations in a safe space about rural issues. And like Sally touched on, we talk about what you would normally talk about at a field day, we just deliver it in a really specific way that works for women. And we talk about things like, about mental health, and we touch on women's issues, and we have, women come from the local nursing units, and they, tell us very interesting things about our bodies and what we should be doing to check, and particularly if you're in really remote areas of Australia. So we've had some pretty powerful conversations as part of those annual events, and super proud that 10 years down this track, we're still doing them.
That's fantastic. And just listening to you now, it seems like one of those, I suppose, tools that you really pulled out was communication. It sounds like in those early days, particularly, communication was in a bit, that's what you had to do a lot of. And the reaction to that was, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Just let me rephrase it again. That you had those groups of women to support you. And was there any other tools, I suppose, that you used? Because there seems like a lot of determination in there as well, to make it through.
Yeah, we weren't walking out of that office without the money and the green light. There was no doubt about that. But we, year upon year, to do it, the tools were addressing the issues and the speakers and the topics that people wanted, and then weaving in maybe more of the delicate stuff that isn't something you'd traditionally talk about at a field day. Postnatal depression isn't something that most people flag when they're also talking about professional development in Landcare, but we weave the two together, and it worked amazingly. And getting in really powerful speakers and great speakers that people wanted to hear from was also really useful. So women like Katrina Myers, who's an avocado farmer at Barham, and is also a mentor and runs an incredible business empowering women. Katrina was instrumental in being one of the first speakers at the event, and this was before she'd sort of had all this success with her business, and you could see where she was going. And having people like that come and be part of the event. And also, like, a huge shout out to a lot of the Indigenous women in our communities. Chicks in the Sticks has been providing women with the opportunity, often for the first time, to publicly speak, and particularly some of the older women in coming and welcoming us to country, which is not something they're always comfortable doing. So that was a really sort of amazing space to be able to provide a lot of the traditional owner women with the space to come and talk and kind of stand up and be heard. So a huge amount of elements coming together and different styles of communication have been really important to make the event successful.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. And I know I've been to one myself, and it was a lot of fun. And we still learnt a lot as well. Fiona, I'm going to move on to you. Working in government and in policy, I would imagine there'd be a daily breaking the bias. Can you tell us some of the issues that you have come across and the constructive methods you have used to challenge the status quo?
Thanks, Kirsty. Yeah, I've been working for 20 years now, and I've faced many biases over that time, more so when I was younger. I can remember, I think Nat alluded to it, going along to meetings with stakeholders, most of them male, assuming that I would be there to pour the tea, top up the urn, and at best take the notes, not someone who was there as a peer to contribute to the meetings. I can remember other occasions where, I was overlooked for a job for a male peer who was successful. It wasn't easy when I was younger to challenge some of those experiences because you didn't have the confidence. I do remember challenging on one occasion, a position that I was overlooked for. And when I spoke to my referee and questioned him, he said, look, actually, I'm sorry, do you want me to go back and change my advice? And I said, no, it's too late for that. And I just moved on to the next position. But there were occasions when people stood beside you. I can remember one meeting where a fellow looked across the table and asked me to go and grab a cup of tea, and it was my colleague, who was the most senior person at the table, stood up and said, I'll get it for you. So it's those times when others step in and provide support to you that I will be eternally grateful for. And I think now that I'm older, I've got more confidence, I've got more experience, I see my role as being there to support other young women, to give them the confidence to, lean in and take those opportunities and be involved in those meetings. I can't change other people's the way they behave, but I can respectfully challenge it and make sure that in my own behaviour I'm not, acting with bias, that I make no assumptions and that you treat everybody fairly.
So, Fiona, I imagine there's women sitting there. I'm sitting here going, how do you get that level of confidence? Is it just, you grow older and you mature and all of a sudden you've got this ability? Or is there things that you do in your life or your personal life that you go, that's really helped me develop my confidence in this?
Look, I think part of it, Kirsty, is just life experience. You grow older, you grow wiser, you do different things and you get to see that you do have a wealth of knowledge and experience, as does everybody, and that we've all got something to contribute. But I do think, when you take the time to reflect and look at some of the really successful women around you and you look at how they behave and how they conduct themselves, you take little pieces of that along the way and try to build that into the way that you operate. And I think that also gives you a sense of confidence as well.
Yeah, I'm hearing a thread through this conversation of support and mentoring, and it's really empowerment. It's really nice to hear that thread coming through. That wasn't planned, which was nice. It's just evolving as we talk as women. So thank you, Fiona. That's great. Sally, a young woman, a farmer, an advocate. How have you managed all those challenges?
I don't know, you just got to do it at the end of the day and get it all done.
Sounds like so many roles, and here's the unconscious bias coming in for such a young person. You've got all these, I suppose you're holding so many things up in the air. It seems amazing. So what are some of the challenges that you face doing that?
I guess going back way to my childhood, when I think about it, there was always this suggestion that as a female, I wasn't as strong as my brother or as capable as him to be on the farm, and that it was far better for me to feed the calves than to go jump in a tractor, things like that. And I guess my whole childhood I was challenging those because I knew, I was very lucky to have my mum. She worked on the farm full time. She was always there, and to have that role model and to see, well, if mum can do it, I can do it too. So I was always challenging that. But you can even see it in my mum, who's worked in agriculture her whole life and has basically kept our family farm running so many times, that she even has had to prove herself in the industry as well. And even though she knows every one of our cows by just looking at them, it's not her that's always approached for the business decisions or for the farming decisions. And she definitely feels that role of, when someone comes to visit, to go put the kettle on and make them a cup of coffee or tea. So I saw that through my own childhood, and I still see it now, and I guess I'm still challenging it, being on the farm, not being overlooked, and having an equal say in decisions, but also being looked at by others who may look over the fence as an equal, because that's the role I play. And also just, I guess, in a sense of the community, just kind of, it feels like you have to prove yourself more and show that you do know what you're talking about, which can be quite challenging at times. And I think there is that sense of you do have to be a bit of an overachiever to kind of get through that and to break through it. But I know in the same breath, I'm very lucky that I didn't grow up in a generation like my mum who couldn't even do agriculture at school. And there wasn't, nearly half of the ag industry made up of women, or if she was to go to ag, like when I'm studying ag at uni, I know if my mum had gone, there would not have been as many females as they are nowadays doing it back then. So I know I'm very grateful for that. And you can definitely reflect and see those changes, but there's still a lot of bias and stigma that we do need to get past. And I think I've definitely been approached with the question of like, well, why are they women-only events and things like that? And why do the women get this? And it's just a very difficult conversation to have, but I think we've got to be bold enough to have it and to stand up for what we need, because I don't think anyone else is going to do it. So, yeah, you kind of have to fill the role yourself and take on a lot of roles and, yeah, juggle the balls and hope you don't drop one.
And even if you do, you're probably good at picking them up. I hear a good thread of determination in that that story, Sally, because my question was, how do you demand that respect? How do you face the challenge, and then how do you then go, hang on, I'm the decision maker here, or I need to be included in this conversation, and nudge yourself in. How did you do that?
I think I just firstly had to do it in my own head. Like, I had to tell myself that I was worthy of being there and that I was capable. Because I think we can be our own worst critic at times, and kind of have that confidence. And then I guess I just kept, every time I got frustrated with it, I realized that was an opportunity that I should have stood up and just said something and have given it a crack. So I kind of just did that. And yeah, again, I guess it comes back to, if I don't do it, then it's not really going to be a role model. Like, who's going to do it? So yeah, just kind of firstly in your own head, and then just kind of stepping out and doing it, and kind of removing yourself away from all the negatives that could happen, and just knowing that it's important, so you've got to do it.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. That was great wisdom. Nat, a female, an Indigenous female, who did agronomy 20 years ago in regional Australia, and now a farmer. Talking with tough farmers, living and earning on a tough land would have brought you some challenges. What are the ways that you manage these and gained respect in breaking down some of those biases?
Sorry, I had to laugh when you said tough farmers, because all my farmer mates will be going, are you calling me tough? It's quite, anyway, how did I break down biases? Look, I've been listening, to the conversations, and just, really connecting and aligning my experiences with what's been said before. I know when I grew up in the cattle industry, and female and male, we had the same roles. We were, out there working on the land and fencing and doing everything. So my first experience of that, or my first hint of gender bias, was when I came down to Southern Australia, and I went to a family farm, and as a female, I was whisked away to the kitchen quite quickly while the men all went out fencing, and I just thought, oh, what's going on here? Because I was really interested to know, to learn how fencing was done down here that didn't involve barbed wire. So, it's just the way I think a lot of us is brought up, as Sally says. We carry those experiences, and we carry those values with us. So for me, I was like, well, actually, I am capable. I'm capable of doing these jobs as much as anyone else. So, why should I be on on the back foot here. But, you know, like Fiona said, it takes everyone else around you to support you in that position. We need people in our workplaces, in our, you know, board tables, in our industries, to be supportive of breaking bias in everything, not just gender bias. We need to break the bias on, you know, what is diversity when we're talking about representation, because we all know the magic happens when we have greater diversity in everything, in contributing to engagement in policy, or you know, just in our community in generally.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that confidence again, that real importance for women to not just be encouraged to do it, but have the confidence in themselves to actually take those steps or say that word or do that thing. So Nat, that sounded very much like you were talking about that as well.
Well, I've been doing it for all my life, right? So, you know, when you're obviously a person of colour, you've got to try and stand up for yourself. And it's a regular thing. You know, racism is out there, and a lot of people don't really understand the difference between, you know, the difference between direct racism and indirect racism. Racism's racism, but we've got a lot of educating to do. So, you know, when you're young and you're having to face those issues from the get-go, you kind of you have to develop a thick skin, or else it shuts you down. And I think that this is what we are all talking about today. It's developing that thick skin to be able to stand up and say, this is my place to be here. This is, I'm as equal to be here as anybody else. And this discussion about, especially women in agriculture, like I'm the president of the Australian Women in Agriculture Association, which is, you know, an amazing organisation for exactly this purpose of providing the stepping stones for women to step up and take on those advocacy roles within our sector. And you know, we've all started out on those committees, and here's another stereotype, as the secretary. You know, I've done my 8 years in my local Landcare group before stepping up to vice pres and then up into presidency. And I think I was the first female, but I was also the first, you know, Indigenous female to do so. But it wasn't, at that time, it wasn't because nobody else, or they weren't allowed to. It was just because we're all so busy, you know. We've got multiple roles to juggle and to manage. And, you know, I do see a lot of women taking that, you know, safe seat at the back because they are so busy juggling everything else. But it doesn't mean that they're not capable of doing so. And it doesn't mean that their opinions aren't valuable and contribute to the discussion.
Yeah, no, that's great. We have a question from someone in the audience, and they have asked, how do you combat age and being female in trying to get positions? ? Often we have degrees and our hands-on, but we still don't get regarded as the breadwinner. Should there be a female quota similar to Indigenous when it comes to environmental positions? Could that help get females into roles to address gender bias? That's a big question. Can I put it out to the panel, see if anybody wants to put their hands up to answer that one?
Look, I'll have a go if no one else.
Great.
I'll have a crack just now, because we were talking about this yesterday. I was talking at the Australian Farm Institute conference, and my topic was on inclusion in ag advocacy. And not that we touched on quotas, but it was very evident that without quotas, how do we get those people in those positions? because we want skilled, knowledgeable people around our tables or within the engagement space.
Yep.
Number one. But number two, we need the diversity. We need that different opinions and experience in order to create good change for the better, for proactive advancement of our society. Without that, we just keep on carrying on the way we are, or we degrade. So, quotas are good. There has been quotas developed for gender and it's working, but we still need the people in those quota positions to have the knowledge and the skills to go with it.
Yeah, so there's a bit in that, isn't there? If you are skilled and you do have that knowledge, by all means put up your hand and challenge yourself to be heard and to have the confidence to take that step. I'm going to move on again. Feel free to pop your questions, keep your questions coming. I am going to just ask a fairly personal question now. Can you tell us about the most influential woman or women in your life, and why are they the most influential, and how has that shaped the person you are? I'm going to start with you, Fiona. Who has been that influential woman, and how has that person shaped you?
I actually find this a hard question to answer because it's difficult to just pinpoint one person necessarily. I think there have been lots of amazing women in my life, in your family, in your friendship networks and at work, and you've taken bits and pieces from everybody. If I did have to think of one person, it was a woman I worked for before I first went on maternity leave the first time around, an incredibly busy person in her day-to-day life who somehow made the time to keep connected with me while I was on leave. And then when I was thinking about coming back to work, I reached out and I said, I actually want to do something different. I would like to come back to work just 10 hours a week, and I'd like to do it 100% from home. Even though the office is only, 15 minutes down the road, I'd like to stay at home with my child, and I'd like to work, around my caring arrangements. It wasn't the done thing at the time. I didn't know anybody else who had done it. And I had put together this proposal about how I thought it could work and what I could do. She wasn't interested. She simply said, we will make it happen. We will set you up at home, and we will make a role that works for you. And it was probably the start of some of those working from home type arrangements coming in to the workforce. And I'll just never forget, her willingness to try something different and to give me the space to do something like that. And I think what it's meant for me is that I don't care where staff work from. It's about the individual and getting the job done. And I think, breaking down that bias for women and allowing us to work the way that best works around us allows us to participate in the workplace and make the contributions that we want to. So that's the one standout for me, Kirsty.
Yeah, that's great, Fiona. And, I think we can all relate to that now in these COVID times, and how our working lives have dramatically changed. And why didn't it change so long ago? Sally, can you tell us about your most influential women, and how they have influenced you? Sounds like your mum was one of them.
Yeah, like Fiona, I really struggled just to pinpoint one, I guess. I've been reflecting over it and thinking of just how many there have been who've stepped up into roles, and I had a female ag teacher that went above and beyond, and not just for me but for pretty much every student, and she just did a really tremendous job, and then she'd go home and do the same on her family farm, and it was just pretty inspiring to see. But there's just so many, it's really hard to pinpoint one, and Mum was definitely, is still, but not put her in the past tense just yet. He's still a very inspirational person for me, because she's set that role model of a woman in agriculture, and that she can kind of, whatever she puts herself to, she can do, and she's always encouraging me to do the same. And even at times in the past where it's felt like she's encouraging me to get away from the farm and not so much agriculture, but just the farm, because I think she's looked back at her life and realised that she spent a lot of time on the farm and didn't really go anywhere else, and may not want that for me as well. She's still a very good role model and very supportive, and I don't think, well, I know for sure I wouldn't be where I am today without that as a role model, and her continued role model. And like I always say, even though it's never to her face, so she sees this, she'll know. If I could be half the woman she is, then I'd be very proud of that. So, yeah, I'd have to put my mum at the top of the list, even though there's a lot.
Yeah, no, thanks. And that's what makes this question so good, isn't it? Because we do have to filter. But I'm hearing some nice trends, you know, somebody who tries something different, somebody who's supportive and encouraging. Nat, tell us about yours.
Yeah, multiple influential women in my life, but I'd have to start with my mum. So mum's obviously, she's white, but she had kids that were, you know, Indigenous, and so she had to deal with that discrimination herself, which was quite challenging, I'm sure, for her, and to not have that support. Especially in the younger years when we were, you know, sort of around in the 1970s, late 1970s, where things weren't always, you know, peachy and rosy. Lots of discrimination. But she's been a Landcare all her life as well, as much as my dad. As you know, mum was always growing things. She used to concoct these amazing manure teas, they were called, and you know, I realise now that this is a, you know, in thing to do now. You know, down to, you know, growing her own, you know, horticulture. You know, setting up her own watermelon business in, you know, the family cattle station, and doing that off her own back. And, you know, I didn't realize just how powerful that was until I, you know, started going to uni and going, wow, yeah, that was pretty good, Mum. You know, and she's still operations manager now at the George Brown Botanic Gardens in Darwin, you know, just, you know, telling people, guiding people, and just so supportive. So, you know, a very influential person in my life, as well as my grandma, as well as many aunties, as well as my mentor who was at uni. You know, I had this amazing mentor. She was an Aboriginal Nookanoon lady who's now passed, and to actually see somebody visualize and you know, really see somebody who has been there before you and done that. She's done the study. She's been in that sphere of, you know, stepping outside your comfort zone. It makes an impact, and it makes you believe that you can do it yourself.
Yeah, that's a big factor, isn't it? You know, having that person that's done it before and go, well, if she can, I can. Tess. Yes.
Yeah, you've got to put your mum at the top of the list for sure. So,
especially if they're watching.
Shout out, Mum. I've got others. So I thought about this in terms of, getting me to where I am now. And there was, my interviewer at the time when I started the CMA, Angela Gladman. She's still at the CMA. She's part of the furniture, but the other two men on the panel, they wanted to go with someone else that had a much more of an ag background, and that's not really my background. So, but Ange saw something in me, and she advocated for me and campaigned for me for the role, and ended up getting it. So huge thanks to Ange. Definitely wouldn't be here without her and sort of her guidance throughout the last 10 years of the CMA. And even before that, I had a school teacher that really showed interest in like pushing me towards environmental studies and geography, and that came out of the blue. Like, I didn't even know those things were on offer, that you could study outdoor ed and environmental science and these things. So yeah, incredible that she did that, and I'm so grateful that she did. And yeah, to think about women also that inspire me, we've got like this amazing trainee, Annalise. She's one of our Indigenous school-based trainees who's gone through school, and now she's she works at the CMA now as, I guess, as an apprentice, but she's just the best. And you give her something to do and you give her some space, and at the moment she's working on our garden, and to just watch her flourish and become so confident. And then, she's now taking on leadership roles with the school-based trainees that are coming through the system as well. She's only 19 years old, and she's so 19. She keeps me young, and she teaches me the lingo of the kids. And she's just so much fun, and to just watch her flourish and come into her own. Oh, she is dream. So she's one to watch out for in the future. And she could take my job any day, I reckon.
It's just really nice to see that spiral effect too, of how those influential women have helped us and then spiraled on for us to help others. And I know all of you in your work and play do that a lot. I've got another question from Chris here, but I'm going to leave that till the last, Chris, because it's a question directed at me rather than the panel. So I'm going to keep going and ask another question, probably again a more personal question, but women have historically been carers, the main carers, often forsaking themselves to provide the care that others need. How do you look after yourself from the inside out to ensure that you're the best person possible? And how important is this to you? And how difficult is it in maintaining it? So there's a sort of a three-pronged question there. And I'm going to go to Sally first. Sally, I grew up on a dairy farm. And the hours my father worked were not conducive to regular gym sessions at all. How do you take time to look after yourself?
I've definitely learnt this the hard way, and was kind of nearly forced to look after myself, I guess. So yeah, definitely learned that way, but it still doesn't make it easy. For me, it's number one, going to bed. I can be a night owl, and I will just work through the night and then really regret it in the morning, having to wake up early. So it's about having that bedtime routine and knowing yep, that's it. It's not that important that it can't wait until tomorrow morning. And then I guess also just taking time away from screens to connect with people one-on-one and have an actual conversation and go for a walk with the dogs or something like that, just to be one in nature and kind of just not have to be in front of a screen reading what people want me to do or what I've got to do or worrying about that. I think that was really important for me, and it definitely doesn't come easy. And I do tend to find if I say during the day take a break, I do find that it's that guilt you feel I should be up doing something and whatnot. But I think at the end of the day, we've got to learn that burnout is a really serious issue, and that if we don't take care of ourselves, that's when our mental health starts to really decline. I know one of the triggers for my personal experience with mental health was just stress and how much stress I was putting on myself to get everything done and to achieve all this and just get so much packed into the day. So I think it's about taking a step back and looking what you're actually doing and serving yourself by recognizing when you might be taking on too much and having the conversations with people, because people are always there to help and support you. It's just we don't often ask. So yeah, sometimes I think I personally have to get better at asking for support and help. But I know when I do it, it's one way I can look after myself.
Yeah, great, Sally. Such a personal story, and so much of what we can, all of us relate to. Asking for help is hard for the majority of us, I'm sure. Being in tune with yourself in order to create those things that you need, really important. Nat, just reading your bio makes me feel so lazy. How do you fit in caring for yourself?
Oh, it's easy.
No sleep.
Look, I think when you're out on a farm and you're out in the environment, I think that in itself provides a comfort level, with the exception of being in a drought or a flood or some other emergency, right? So yes, I've been through droughts here on our place, and it is not pretty, and you just need to get away when that happens. So it's knowing it's knowing your signs of when you are struggling or about to struggle, and really having that support network around you to indicate to you, hey, you're getting to a point. Come and have a cup of tea or something along those lines. The support networks are so important for everybody at every level, but especially for people who are on the land, who are very isolated and don't have people checking in on them on a daily, hourly basis as you would in a normal sort of town workforce. But for me, we've got working dogs as well. So that in themselves, that they just provide the most amazing sense of connection. And it's called mindfulness. It's being able to, take your mind off your worries and just really concentrating on, the things that make you happy. And sometimes for me, it's just going out and watering my plants or my seedlings. Like, I've been doing this all my life, watering, my plants and seeing them grow. There's something really therapeutic about that.
And then pulling out the weeds in between.
That's great. It's setting boundaries as well. So when you talk about all these things that I've been involved in, it's knowing your boundaries and knowing how much you can take on, and learning to say no to things. So that's one of the toughest things that a lot of us find is, saying, hey, probably not. How about someone else? But when you do take on these roles, you've got to stick to your values, because if you don't stick to your values, you are going to clash. And I think that's when you get this real tension in your lives about, I'm really unhappy here. It's really easy if you follow your value set. You know what you can choose and what you can let go.
No, thanks for that. Boundaries, support, some nice threads. Tess, people are everywhere in your life. You've got Landcare, you've got work, you play Landcare, you work Landcare, you have people everywhere. And I know you look after family and stuff like that. So how do you look after yourself to bring the best of you to where you are?
Yep, I turn the computer off and I say no to my 160 Landcare groups. That is enough on Friday afternoon. Absolutely no more. So boundaries totally huge for me. I think that took me a long time to learn and give myself permission to have boundaries and put them in place and act on them. And in recent years, kind of like Nat, the mindfulness, like the Smiling Mind app is the best and a lifesaver. That is something that I use every single day. And I use it before work, which is really interesting. But I just find that coming in, particularly at home in your home office, is like, okay, I'm ready for work and this is my day. A couple of other things, but one thing consistently over the last few years, that my 30th present to myself was doing bar, which is like Pilates and ballet sort of mixed together. Barre, as ScoMo called it. So bar is amazing, and that's just been an exercise that since I finished horse riding, I'd never really had a physical exercise that I enjoyed or wanted to be part of, and just found that. I just found something that I loved, and I've just kept going with that, and I just do it twice a week, no matter what. I don't schedule meetings that clash with it. I just make it time for it, and I make it happen. So yeah, there's sort of two things that particularly the Smiling Mind app. I'd really recommend everyone jump on their phone after this and download it. It's really useful.
No, that's great. Body and soul is how I would see that, Tess. Fiona, you're balancing work, you're balancing study, you're balancing family. Where is the you in all this?
Not enough you, I will confess, not enough me, I should say. It's something that I struggle with and I need to get better at, and I think a lot of women would probably say that. I know that I'm a much better person when I am caring for myself, and for me, caring for myself is going for a run. I don't put in earphones, I just head for the fire trails and just run, and I listen and I look and I feel exhausted and I think about things differently, see things from a different angle. So I'm definitely better when I do it. I need to get better at giving myself permission to do that, because I know I'm a happier wife, mother, employee, just generally when I do that. But I also need to make sure that I'm modelling, self-care for others around me, and making sure that the people I work with feel like they have permission to do that self-care and go for lunch breaks and log off early and go for a walk if the weather's good, particularly in these COVID times when we're a bit trapped against our devices in our own homes. We need to really make sure that we do take that time to disconnect and smell the roses.
Yeah, grow them first, water them, grow them, then smell them. Yes, absolutely. Look, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I've got one more question, and I'm very aware that there's a couple of questions on the chat, but I really think that this is an important question, so I want to pursue it. What is the one thing that you would like to see more of or change in order for women to take lead or continue to lead in natural resource management? And I'm giving ourselves a little bit out here by continue or bring us up, but what is that one thing that you would like to see more of or change in order for women to really lead in natural resource management? Nat, I'm going to come back to you first. I feel like you would have so many ideas in this space, but can you tell us your top ideas for women to continue to lead?
Oh, we've already touched on it today. I think one of the biggest things is just making sure that support is there for them, and really put some funding investment into. Sorry, that's just my inside cat. Just putting some papers on the floor. So that support, investing in women is the biggest thing that we can do, and not argue, just say yes, absolutely, it's a given. I think also when we talk about women leading in natural resources, from my cultural lens, I see a lot of women leading in natural resources, but it might not be formal, but we need to formalize this. So, I can say that there's only 3% of representation in the bush food sector. It's a $1 billion industry. So, and that's in that 3%, there is not many women. So why is that the case? How can we lift this level up to include women, First Nations women, working and delivering in this space? When we talk about natural, you think in terms of that, the funding and investment for women to, have those skills to feel confident to do that is one of those things? I think there's a lot of women out there already with the confidence to immediately start this. It's just pulling it together, and it's engaging in each region and getting it going. I mean, there is no excuses. We need to, when we talk about this particular thing of breaking the bias, this is missing in Australia right now.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that, Nat. That was insightful. Fiona, I'm going to target the policy field now. How do women get into the policy field? Why do you think it's important to have women up there represented at this level? And what are the key attributes that a woman can bring to create change at this level?
Oh, that's a few parts to that one.
I know. So many questions all in one.
Yeah. Look, I think we need women in policy because as policymakers, what we do impacts all of us. And the more people that are at the table, the more diverse opinions and expertise, the better for everybody. In terms of how do we get more women to the table, I think we all have a role in supporting women and creating opportunities for women to get into these sorts of positions. And I really encourage women to lean in. I know and I'm sure many of us suffer from imposter syndromes. We look at others and we think, oh no, I can't do that, or somebody else would be better. And we've all got knowledge, experience, skills that are valuable and that need to be considered. So I would just encourage people to lean in, take the opportunity. You won't regret not taking it, but in years to come, you'll probably regret in years to come the opportunities you didn't take, not the ones that you did. So
yeah, thanks Fiona. Yep, lean in and be confident.
Yeah.
Sally, ag studies, it's I think when we first talked, you said that there's a greater percentage of women getting involved in agricultural studies at university level. What would you say to a young woman starting their farming journey?
I think just pretty much don't give up, and like that there will be hurdles and that, but there is plenty of support out there, and just reach out to that support. And I think it's really important to find like a mentor or someone that will support you through it and can kind of relate to you. And I think that's really important. And I'd love to see more of that, like more mentorship for young women coming up in the ag sector. And also just like to not feel as hard as it might be. I know some particularly younger girls and that can feel intimidated when they are faced with agriculture and farming and the male-dominated industry. And I would just really encourage them to like really question why do you feel intimidated? Like, why don't you deserve to be here? Because you do. And to really challenge that and lean on your support networks to overcome that, because they definitely have a role to play in agriculture, and they deserve to be there just as much as a male does. And there is plenty of incredible women out there that will support them through it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks. Thanks, Sally. Yep, mentors. We've got a question here about mentors, but I'll finish with Tess first. What do you see as being the most important development for women in breaking the bias and stepping forward to lead?
I think really early on, I was sort of shown that, well, I sort of felt like you couldn't be what you couldn't see. And in my time in Landcare and in natural resource management, I've seen my colleagues step up. I've seen them become senior managers. I've seen our CMA boards take on women, and I think 50% of CMA boards in Victoria are now led by women and chaired by women. Like, that is essential. We need to see this. We need to see it, and it needs to be real, and it needs to be there, whether it's come from quotas like we talked about earlier or otherwise. Who cares? It needs to be there, and we need to be at the table and leading. And people in less senior roles within these organizations can access and talk to those women. So that's been super important, I reckon. And our current CEO told me you can lead from anywhere, and that can really annoy some people, but I found that really inspiring. I felt like no matter where I was in this organization, I could lead, and I could take ideas and run with it, and take promotions, or go do that training course and go do professional development, or whatever it might be. So yeah, I try and instill that in any of the people that I'm working with or mentoring, is just to say you can lead from anywhere, and yeah, the stepping stones will lead you on a pretty amazing path. So yeah, I think that's really important in women's leadership.
Yeah, that's a great comment to finish off. And the question we have from a lady, a person on the audience, is what about mentor roles for women? Traineeships are great for younger generation of women, but is there anything for the over 50s cohort? And I would encourage this whole conversation to be, you know, what you just said. I'd reiterate what you said, Tess. How to, you know, where is that person? It doesn't matter what age they are. If you're being inspired by somebody who's 19 or 7 or 70, learn from them and take that, and just, you obviously can't formalize a 7-year-old relationship maybe, but you could certainly formalize other things or just have it informal. And I'm sure many of us, as we've said, the influential women in our lives haven't all been a formal relationship. They've all been quite informal. So yeah, I would encourage you with that. We have 5 minutes left, and it has been a wonderful conversation, particularly for me sitting here. So Nat, Tess, Sally, Fiona, thank you so much for joining us today. I certainly have loved hearing your stories and your journey and the impact that it's having on your communities. And I think that's the real take home for today. I've heard things like support, empower, confidence, step out, take on, just do. And so they're the messages that we can all do. They're the things that we do have within us. Get that person, your friend, your mum, your auntie alongside you, and be encouraged to take your next steps in the journey towards looking after our land and looking after our people. Thank you to those who have joined us from all over Australia. We really appreciate your time and interest in this webinar, Women of Landcare Break the Bias. I hope you are able to take home some gems and integrate it into your own lives. I certainly have felt like I can do that today. Keep an eye out on the Landcare Australia's social media and newsletters for news about upcoming webinars in the Landcare webinar series. And finally, a quote for the session. When I look at a person, I see a person, not a rank, not a class, not a title. And that's again by Chris Jammy. So I want to thank you, and Chris, my apologies to not getting to your question, but I really felt like the stories of these women were important to hear from. Happy to answer it over email. Okay. Thank you again, everyone. Take care.